Hi, my name is Ben Klekamp with the Florida Integrated Food Safety Center of Excellence. In this screencast, I will provide an introduction to check code in Epi Info 7. Check code is writing computer code to allow the Epi Info program to automatically know when to complete a task for a user. While there are many actions that can be coded for using check code, the two primary categories are 1. Make data entry easier and faster, and 2. Reduce data entry errors. While writing computer code may sound difficult to some listeners, Epi Info 7 has introduced a new check code wizard that uses a point-and-click interface, which drastically simplifies classical code writing. Before we begin, I would like to introduce a simple framework for you to remember that describes the 3 steps for writing check code. These 3 steps describe what the computer needs to know about the action you want it to make. The first step is where, as in, where does the action need to happen? The second step is when, as in, when does the action need to happen? The third step is what to do, as in, what action do you want the software to complete? Remembering these 3 steps will aid you as you start to become more familiar with writing check code. Let's begin. Open your Epi Info 7 program and click on the Create Form tool. I'm going to open a new project to start this training. To open a new project, click on the New Project button in the toolbar. I will name my project Test, save the project as a Microsoft Access database, and name my form Example. However, if you will be using your project for a different data collection activity, please name and save as appropriate. When finished, click OK. Now that we have our new project opened, we first need to add in fields where our data will be captured before we can begin to write our check code. In this screencast, I will demonstrate how to have the Epi Info check code automatically calculate the age of a patient after the date of birth is entered. To do this, I will need to add 2 fields to our blank page. The first type will be a date field. To add a date field to my page, I'm going to drag and drop date from the Project Explorer to the page. Place the field anywhere on the page, as we can always move the field later. The pop-up window that opens allows you to provide details for the date field. The question or prompt is the text that shows up on the page next to the field, cueing the data entry person on what to enter. In this example, I'm going to write date of birth. The field name is the title of the field that is recorded into the database. Remember to keep this name concise yet informative. In this example, I will use DOB to denote date of birth. Feel free to explore or use some of the other options provided in this pop-up window. However, for the purposes of this demonstration, they are not needed. Once finished, click OK. The second field we need to create is a number field that will capture the age of the patient. From the Project Explorer, drag and drop a number field onto the page. For this example, I will name my prompt and field name both age. Once finished, click OK. We now have both of our fields created, which once our check code is written, will allow the age of the patient to be automatically calculated from the entered date of birth. Before we move on to actually writing the check code, it is important to note that selecting the correct type of field for the action you would like to happen with your check code is critical to your success. Even if you write all of your check code correctly, if the wrong type of field is selected, the check code may not work. For example, if we had selected a text field type instead of a date field type for the date of birth field in this example, the check code we are going to write next would not work. The reason for this is that Epi Info would not recognize the date of birth entered as an actual date. Instead, the software would think text had been entered, which cannot be used to calculate age. If your check code does not work during your troubleshooting, make sure to check the field types, as this is an easily overlooked mistake. To begin writing check code, click on the Check Code button in the Tool menu bar. Before we begin writing check code, let me provide you with an orientation of the check code window. Across the top of the window, we have our File and Tool menu bar, including the ability to validate check code, close the window, and save or print check code. The large window in the center left is where the check code will appear after creation by Epi Info, or where code can be manually written. Along the bottom left is the message board, where messages on your check code from Epi Info will display. The two windows stacked on the right side are the Epi Info check code wizard, which allow you to easily generate check code. The top window, entitled 1, Choose Field Block for Action, addresses the where and when in the 3 steps to generate check code discussed earlier in the screencast. The bottom window, entitled 2, Add Command to Field Block, addresses the final step of what to do. For our demonstration, we want to calculate the age of the patient after entering the patient's date of birth. This means the answer to the where in our 3-step framework will be at the date of birth field. In the top window, expand Page 1 page, then find, expand, and click on the DOB field. Under the DOB field, there are 2 options, before and after. Since we want the check code to calculate the age of the patient after the date of birth is entered, select After. Once you select After, notice the button between the 2 check code wizard windows becomes active. By clicking on the button, the Epi Info check code wizard will generate the check code for the where and when check code steps. Before moving on to the final step of the check code, make sure your cursor is located in the empty line under Add Code Here in the check code window. This lets the check code wizard know you want the check code for the What to Do step to be placed here. In the bottom window on the right side, click Assign, as we will be assigning the calculated age of the patient to the Age field. In the Assign pop-up window, the Assign variable field is where we will use the drop-down menu to select Age as the field we will assign the calculated age. The Equal Expression field is where we will put in our calculation. On the far right side of this field, select the Function button, and using the drop-down menu, select Date Functions and then Years. This will insert the code needed to calculate the difference in years between 2 dates. Please be aware that the inserted notation between and including the greater than and less than symbols needs to be removed before the code will work. Our start date for this calculation will be date of birth. To remove the unnecessary notation and insert the DOB field at the same time, highlight Start Date and use the Available Variable drop-down menu to select DOB. Our end date for this calculation will be the system date of your computer. In other words, the date showing up in the lower right side of your computer monitor if you are watching this on a PC, or the upper right if you are watching this on a Mac. Highlight the end date notation and select the Function button. Use the drop-down menu to locate System Functions and then System Date. The check code to calculate a patient's age from the date of birth is now complete. But before you click on OK, note that once you close the Assign pop-up window, it cannot be reopened. You will have to either manually edit any errors in the check code window, or if you want to use the check code wizard again, erase the generated code and start over. Once finished, click OK. Before closing the check code window, make sure you validate your work. The validation function will tell you if there is syntax error in your code, but it will not tell you if you did the calculation wrong. For example, if you switch the DOB and the system date in our check code example, no error would be caught by the validation function. But when you entered a date into the date of birth field, the calculated age would appear as a negative number. Finally, make sure you save your work. Check code does not automatically save. If you were to close the check code window before saving, you will lose all of your work you completed. After validating and saving, close the check code window. Part of the check code writing process is to check your work to make sure it functions as expected before you begin to enter real data. To do this, go to the Enter Data tool. Next, enter a date in the date of birth field and hit the Tab button on your keyboard to see if the check code works. Success! please check back in with the Florida Integrated Food Safety Center of Excellence at www.foodsafetyflorida.org for more Epi info and food safety resources.